This is a special meeting of the El Centro City Council on Thursday, June the 27th, 2024. Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Carter,
Present.
Councilmember Oliva,
Present.
Councilmember Garcia,
Present.
Interim Mayor Pro Tem Cardenas Singh,
Present.
Mayor Marroquin.
Present. And may I call on Councilmember Garcia to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes. Hand over your heart. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Councilmember Carter, please lead us in an invocation.
Please bow your heads. Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you just simply saying thank you. We ask you just to bless those people that are on the highways and the byways, that they're traveling for the summer months. Bless the people who are out there on the streets, Lord. Bless the people that are just out there that don't have things to do, that just don't know what's going on right now. You hear a lot that's going on right now, Lord. Just take your control. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Madam City Attorney, any reports on closed session?
There is no reportable action from closed session, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. And we go into public comments. But first, I'd like to read this notice to the public. This is a public meeting. If there is an item on the agenda on which you wish to be heard, you are asked to complete a blue speaker slip and submit it to the city clerk prior to the start of the meeting. Persons wishing to address the council are not required to identify themselves. However, this information assists the mayor by ensuring that all persons wishing to address the council are recognized and also assists the city clerk in preparing the city council meeting minutes. When the item is announced and your name is called by the mayor, please step to the podium and state your name for the record. Unless the mayor extends the time, there is a 3-minute time limit for each public presentation. If you wish to address the council concerning any other matter not appearing on the agenda, you may do so during the public comment portion of the agenda. However, you may not show a visual presentation without review of that material. If you do so, you will be considered out of order. Madam City Clerk, do we have any requests for public comment?
No, none, Mayor.
Either in chambers or remotely?
None.
None. Thank you. Okay. So we will now move on to the consent agenda. Colleagues, please vote.
Waiting for it to come up, Madam Mayor.
Pardon?
I think we're waiting for it to
Yeah.
come up.
Okay. And so those items on the consent agenda are adopted 5-0. So now we move on to new business, and we have a presentation by Mrs. Carla Chaparro, Director of Finance, on the annual fiscal year 2025 budget.
Hi, good afternoon, Madam Mayor and council members. The item that I have before you is the City of El Centro 2024-2025 annual budget. And starting with the general fund, our total budget for the general fund is 40.4 million. Out of that 40.4 million, 31,576,913 is salary and benefits, which makes 78% of the overall budget. And then 8,139,333 is supplies and services, which makes 22% of our overall budget. And this is just a graph that shows where the revenue is coming from, the different funding sources. As you can see, our number one revenue source is sales tax. That's 42.943%. And for next fiscal year, we are expecting to receive 17,344,408. And then after that, it's motor vehicle in lieu, which is 13.8%, and we're expecting to receive 5,595,000. And then after that is property tax, which is 11.4%, and we're expecting to receive 4.6 million. And then this one shows where the different allocations go to the different departments. As you can see here, our biggest allocation goes to public safety, which is police and fire, and that's at 56.3%. And looking at our general fund balance, we're projecting that our beginning fund balance when we begin fiscal year 2025 will be 26.6 million. And we are projecting revenue of 38.6 million and expenditures of 40.4 million, and a deficit of 1.8 million. And that's going to bring down our fund balance to 24.8 million. And out of that 24.8 million, we have some designations, which are 10% of our operating expenditures, which is 4,041,625, and then accrued leave liability, which is 2.2 million, and then vehicle major equipment replacement at 3 million. And after all those designations, we have an undesignated fund balance of 15.6 million. And then moving on to the enterprise funds. For water, we are estimating to receive 9.8 million and to have expenses of 10.7 million, 6.9 of operating expenses and 3.8 of non-operating expenses, and a loss of 941,000. And for wastewater, we are expecting to receive revenue of 14.5 and expenses of 18.8 million, operating expenses of 6.6 million, and then non-operating expenses of 12.2 million, and a loss of 4.3 million. Here, what's causing the loss is that we have a lot of capital budgeted for next fiscal year in this fund. If you see, you look at non-operating expenses, it is 12.2 million, and that's capital mostly. We are budgeting 10 million in capital in this fund for next fiscal year. And then moving to the special revenue funds, we are projecting revenue of 29.8 million, and then operating expenses of 5.2 million, capital expenses of almost 40 million, transfer outs of 5.5, and then transfer ins of 95,000, and a loss of 20 million. Same thing here. What's causing the loss is that we are budgeting 40 million of capital, and mostly it's this is the one category that has a lot of different funds that fund major projects. For example, we have the ARPA fund here, which is funding the Southern Pump Station, stormwater improvements, partial funding of the construction of the police station. We have Measure P, which has a lot of bigger ticket items, capital items. We have our parks grants, which is also funding the improvements going on in different parks. And then moving on to capital project funds, we're estimating to have revenue of 1.4 million and non-operating expenses of 25.9 million and a loss of 24.5. So same thing here. The reason why you're seeing a loss is because this is the one fund that has the majority of the funding for the police station. We are budgeting 24,586,472 for the construction of the police station for next fiscal year under this fund. And then moving on to personnel, we are adding new personnel to this fiscal year 2025 budget. It is a total of 8.5 positions, and the cost is 676,098. And just here's the listing. We're adding an accountant, a building maintenance mechanic 1, crime analyst, an evidence technician, a code enforcement officer 1, a park maintenance worker 1, custodian 2, a children's librarian, and a certified water distribution operator. And this is salary and benefits. And then capital, the fiscal year 2025 budget includes a capital of 77.3 million. And this graph just shows where the majority of the capital improvements are going towards public safety at 41%, and that's really mostly the construction of the police station. And then public works at 41%. They have a lot of projects going on. Parks and recreation at 13%, and then other miscellaneous items at 6%. And that's it. Any questions?
Chaparro, let's go back to the wastewater funds. Yeah, I believe that there were two.
Water?
So, yeah, for water and water and wastewater, right?
Yes.
I am not comfortable with all these deficits that are here, and this is not something that that was made clear to us during our finance committee meetings. So why is it reflecting now?
What happens with all these funds is they're not deficits. They're deficits right now because they're projects they're capital projects that are going on, and a lot of them. What happens is that we get their grants, for example. So we don't get the funding. We have to spend the money first, and then we get the funding. So that's why you
So
see it
It's
reflected
like a
as a
reimbursement
negative.
process?
Yes. So you see it as a negative right now, but then once the money comes, so you have to spend it first. You ask for the reimbursement. You kind of have to submit a claim, and then it comes back to us as revenue. So, but it doesn't happen at the same time. You have to spend it first, and then so that's why you see the negative fund balances.
Does that hold true to the wastewater fund as well?
So the water and wastewater funds, they're like kind of like and they're enterprise funds, so they're like business type funds. So for this one, it's the fund itself is generating revenue. So not exactly.
The
But it
wastewater
comes-
fund is not a reimbursement process as this one here?
The water and wastewater fund, no.
Okay,
Can
Yes.
Abraham help us with that? Maybe. No, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to ask, Carla, is it fair to say that we're looking at this snapshot in terms of what's going to happen this fiscal year? Visually, it looks like a loss. But if you were to look at this loss in terms of the fund balance in the particular funds, what we're saying here is these losses are going to get absorbed from the current fund balance. And this city has enough to cover these expenses. But again, just looking at the snapshot, it looks like a loss.
Mhm.
Is that fair to say?
Yes, and
Okay.
that really is what it is. You see it like at a point in time, you're seeing it as you're seeing it as a loss, but and then also what happens is that we budget for capital projects and we don't complete all of them all the time. So you're not gonna see that as an actual loss mostly. But yes, if you do see a loss, it's gonna come out of our working capital for water and wastewater, which is kind of like a fund balance. It's like kind of like your savings.
Your savings.
Mhm.
So what I'm gathering in all of these slides, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that we do have money in savings, and we're doing our best to get grants, to get reimbursements, to cover some of the costs throughout the years. But as it looks like right now, as we're looking to the upcoming fiscal year, we understand that we're going to have to dip into our savings. But that's why it was created, and that's why it's there, that we've been as prudent as possible to maintain somewhat of a savings account. And that's what that purpose is for, so that when times like this happen, we're able to dip into that and cover these costs. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. I think what was missing, Madam Mayor and colleagues, in terms of the presentation and just the overall feeling is that component is
Yeah,
the
and I
fund
was-
balance that's there, that it would be next, right? You see a loss of 941,000, and then you right underneath that would have been fund balance, right, to cover that cost, and then net fund balance, we would have looked at whatever our savings account is minus the 941,000 to show that we're good. And I think that visually would have.
Or
At
in
least
this
given us
case,
that.
also, the projected reimbursement could have,
Yes.
that could have also been a line item on this presentation so that we can show that we're not truly going to end in a deficit, so that, this doesn't cost us the angst that it just did. Okay, and the next slide over. Okay, so
And for
that's,
example, like in the like capital projects, that's one that we got bond proceeds. So it's a one-time
Okay.
cash insert, like
Like
a
a
one-time
cash
cash,
infusion of-
yeah, and it's standing in our cash. So out of that cash, you kind of withdraw to
okay,
fund your
so,
police station.
so for future
So-
reference, okay, and so not to cause us the angst that we just experienced, maybe adding in a line item, stating that, okay, from this, we're going to disperse from, the funds that we have in bond funding, for example.
Mhm.
This, you could have added in the reimbursement, the projected reimbursement after you filed the claim, to show what the true, if there's really going to be a true deficit or not. Okay, so that is where, this really caught me by surprise. Okay.
Madam Mayor, if I can, I think
Yes.
what's happening is we're only getting half the truth, right?
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
think the piece that's missing here, exactly as we're stating,
Mhm.
is you're showing the expenditure and what the future to cover that expense. And then I know I had just a couple of questions after this
Yes,
is
no, go
done
ahead.
for Abraham.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So, okay, let's move on. Going to the wastewater slide. Okay, so that 4.3 million, this could have been, you could have shown here that you're going to then start dispersing funds from is it the bond funds that,
No, this one, the wastewater, it's out of your working capital. So it's
Out
like
of-
kind of like
out of
out of
working
your
capital?
savings. Uh-huh.
so that would go into the reserves,
Mhm.
so
If you were to,
if we really truly
actually
were to
spend-
end in a deficit. Okay. All right. Any questions?
I think it's just that missing piece. I just
Yeah.
feel like we only have a portion. It's like I'm told all the expenses, but nowhere am I seeing where the funding stream or where the additional dollars are going to come in to cover those costs. So I feel that it makes it difficult to just absorb an expense without showing the remedy or where the funding's coming from.
If I may, Madam Mayor, I think what's important here and the message that I just want the residents of El Centro to know is that we have a balanced budget. And that this visual shows, as my colleague mentioned, the first half of it. And it's a reality. And it's so that folks understand that because of inflation, because of costs, because of the current revenue streams, there is that. Now, the leadership, because we have a savings account, is able to sustain that hit. But that's the missing piece. And just so that folks understand that we do have a balanced budget, there's a savings account that's going to cover this. And that's visually the missing component, because the message should be that we have a balanced budget and that we're going to be looking at and deliberating on. And that's the part that we just wanted to make sure that folks who will be watching this later visually understand that this is the first half of it and that we're covering this cost in certain ways.
Any other questions? All right. Can you move forward to the
which one?
capital project?
Capital?
Okay. So here we are also faced with another huge deficit.
This is the one that I was saying that it's this is where we got bond proceeds last year. And when we get those bond proceeds, it's a one-time revenue coming in, and you once you receive those monies, it stays in your cash. And when as you complete or you work on the project and you complete the project, you're withdrawing money from that cash from the bond proceeds.
I guess maybe what I'm recommending, that this could have been presented a little bit differently, so that you also added in a line item that this is what we expect to insert or inject into this from the bond proceeds. Okay, so because that right there is, for anyone that's looking at it, that's very concerning. Okay,
Okay.
okay, so any other questions, colleagues?
No, but I think Member Cardenas Singh had some questions for Abraham. Did you want
I think it was the same. I think what happens, Mr. Abraham, if I can, so when we see these capital projects, we see it as a whole, and I know that you have a system in place in regards to how you budget and how you complete those projects. And so that's why we're seeing it all lumped in together. So it can be, the word isn't misleading, but I think it's all put in one. And so maybe that you could provide us some clarity on that.
Yeah, definitely. So I think what you're seeing here is us delivering on projects. We function more on a pay-go system as opposed to borrowing many times. And as we sit here for water and wastewater recently, we do have some bonds from prior projects, but right now we do a pay-go. It's very similar to your savings account at home. You get your checking, you get a deposit every month. Let's say you get $5,000. You spend it for 10 months, you spend only 4,000. So you saved 1,000 for 10 months. So now you have some extra money. You have $10,000. So that goes into your savings account, right? So you start building that up over time. So last fiscal years, basically, we were showing more revenue coming in than expense. So we've been building up this amount so that when the time comes for that big project, we've saved enough to get that project going. It's a pay go. So that's what you're seeing here. You're seeing as compared to the 1 year revenue, let's say in this slide, a 1 year revenue is the 1.3 million here, but we had already saved over time to get this, whether it was a savings or it was a bond infusion from a prior year or this year, that's not shown there. So we were just saying just your normal ordinary revenue is that, but we're delivering on a bunch of projects from the savings that we had or from previous infusions or from other revenue. That's the one line item that's not shown. So we know there's no budget. We're not going negative, nothing of that. So we're just fine. And water and wastewater, same. It's not that account, but it's the same idea. So we've been saved over time. So at Public Works, we keep a 5-year projection based on revenue and expenditures for our water and wastewater funds, and we've been building it to cover our southern pump station, the improvements of the water plant that are going on, the clarifiers projects, all these projects that I keep coming over. The funding's there. We never present a project if there's no funding to back. And this is just showing that we're making all these projects. I'm not sure if this one includes the police station. So the bond income probably came in last fiscal year. So that's already there. That's not shown here. So if you have that one line item, it would show that you already have, other than just a 1 year revenue coming in, you have all this already in your piggy bank to cover this 24 million and whatever is needed. Hopefully that helps clarify it.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so in the end, the bottom line is that we ended in a $1.7 million deficit. And that is what we're going to take from reserves,
For the general
to
fund.
balance the budget.
Yes,
Okay.
it's right here, 1.8.
Okay. All right. So, members, but any additional questions or comments for Mrs. Chaparro before we move on to vote on this? No? Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Chaparro.
Thank you.
Okay. So members, we are now voting to adopt the 2025 fiscal year budget. Okay. And that is adopted 5-0. Okay, so that we now adopt resolution number 24-56, resolution of the City Council of the City of El Centro, California, adopting the annual budget for the fiscal year 2024-2025. All right, and thank you very much. And that concludes our meeting. It is 1:28, and this meeting is adjourned.